What is a Mario game? I'm being dead serious. What do you, dear viewer, consider to be the definition of a Mario game? At first glance, this seems to be an easy question to answer. Mario games are fundamentally platformers, with heavy emphasis placed on the collection of power-ups and a combat system that revolves around jumping on enemies. At one time, this was all the Mario brand was and needed to be. But that was then. This is now. The Nintendo mascot is featured in over 100 games, spanning several genres and generations since its inception. Yet, despite this mess of characters and concepts, there is still absolutely a clear-cut identity at the core of this Mario-shaped enigma. To help find that identity, I've gone ahead and analyzed 155 Mario games, considering all of their unique factors and their similarities. These similarities overlap and extend into other games like some giant 155 circle Venn diagram, and at the very center of it all is an intersection of all Mario games and genres, the place where we shall construct our Super Mario vision board. In this video, I shall be searching for and listing every similar trait shared by all the other Mario games in order to craft the character's true identity. So how do we go about analyzing Nintendo's greatest hero? To start, I've split the games into 12 categories based on genre and style in order to better understand how the franchise shakes out. Our first category is the before times, which places its emphasis less on genre and more on the period in which these games were conceived. There's only a handful of titles here, but the diversity in genre between them is very telling. After his debut appearance in Donkey Kong, Nintendo tried inserting the Mario character into a bunch of other games, from NES sports titles like Golf and Pinball to the original Mario Bros. Game. Even before he got his start, Nintendo knew that Mario had franchise potential. Either that or they just didn't want to design any more 8-bit characters. Making an iconic character with so few pixels isn't easy. The official end of the before times is marked by the arrival of Super Mario Bros. In 1985, which brings us to our second category. Jumpman, baby! To many, this is the definition of a Mario game. Brick blocks, coins, and jumps aplenty. There are also a pretty decent number of games in this category, which does lend itself well to establishing Mario's true identity, but let's not get too hasty, folks. We've got a lot more games to review. One important thing to note about the Jumpman games is that they all follow a very distinct naming convention. They're all Super Mario games. New or not, every single 2D, or 3D linear platforming, Mario game has the Super label slapped on the box, which I initially considered to be a pattern exclusive to the Jumpman games, but the Super Mario web stretches out much farther than that. We'll discuss that more in a second. Our next category came into existence in 1996 with the release of Super Mario 64. Hey, remember how I said we'd talk more about that whole Super thing? Well, guess what? We're doing it now. 64 created its own subgenre of platformer that kept the spirit of the original Super Mario games while bringing the entire thing into the third dimension. I'm not even talking about the visuals here, I'm talking about structure, objectives. Everything that was once a straight line in the Jumpman games is now a fully fleshed out shape in 64. That's what makes games like Super Mario 3D World different from games like Super Mario Galaxy. 64-likes can have linear mission structures, but ultimately they make use of sprawling jungle gym worlds filled with all sorts of smaller objectives for the player to complete. Despite the difference in structure, all the 64-likes are still Super Mario games, which brought me to my second hypothesis. Super Mario is a title reserved for only proper platformers, 2D or otherwise. Spoiler alert, I was super wrong. At one point or another, I'm sure that Nintendo decided the term Super was reserved for specific platforming titles or games they felt were extremely emblematic of the Mario character, but in recent years that name has been tossed around so much it hardly has any meaning. Super Mario Strikers, Super Mario Party, Super Mario Run? These games barely resemble the platformers that spawn them, at least in gameplay, which proves that it doesn't really matter if it's a Super Mario game or not, it's what's on the inside that really counts. That aside, something interesting I discovered about the 64 likes was they're one of the categories with the fewest games. A fact I find fascinating because for the longest time they were my ideal form of Mario game. Sunshine, Galaxy, and Odyssey all formed the basis through which I perceived other titles in the long-running Mario franchise, and I don't know if that's a testament to their quality and longevity, or if I just had a narrow way of thinking. Either way, crafting a true blue identity for the Nintendo mascot requires us to examine these quote-unquote classics. We've already covered the differences, so now we have to talk similarities, specifically between a game like 64 and Super Mario Bros. As always, there's a heavy emphasis on jumping. Take 64 for instance, which has a lot of different jumps. The games also share a similar coat of paint. Lots of coins, pipes, mushrooms, and more always manage to crop up even when Mario is adventuring in the Arctic or a desert or inside a fucking clock. Lastly, Homeboy M to the Ario still has a fair share of power-ups at his disposal, and they make that super apparent in the promotional artwork for 64. There's a good goddamn reason Mario's wearing the wing cap on the cover of the game. It's supposed to be a selling point. With this info, we can start slapping some traits on our Mario Identity Vision board. There's bound to be plenty of jumping. Each game must have a distinct visual aesthetic similar to Super Mario Bros., and power-ups are guaranteed to make an appearance. Moving on, we now arrive at a very interesting and beloved category of Mario games, the Mario RPGs. Made in collaboration with Square and released for the SNES in 1996, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars managed to break new ground for the jovial plumber, creating what is essentially his own Final Fantasy game. Perhaps even more shocking is the fact that this combo worked so well and bred a number of spiritual successors in the Paper Mario and Mario & Luigi games. Naturally, being an RPG, these games don't really have a lot in common with the mainline games in the franchise, but those key traits we threw up on the vision board, all present in these games. What's more, Mario RPGs have a new, unique trait that carries over into the grander Mario identity, the presence of narrative. Despite the deceptive simplicity of the Mario character, there has always been the presence of some form of narrative. All the way back to Donkey Kong. The characters all have a relation to one another, and there is absolutely a story being played out here, motivating the player to keep trudging on for the sake of Pauline. This is obviously the loosest definition of narrative. The titles that would follow would continue to expand upon the story, building future Mario games to be somewhere between grand epic and a pleasant little outing with friends. Still, Mario games having some form of plot is standard, and therefore key to the Mario identity. Story is nice and all, but haven't you ever played Super Mario Bros. And wondered, where's all the fucking sports? You want sports? You can have them! There are an absolutely ludicrous amount of Mario-based sports games, even some that were made in the before times. For whatever reason, Mario the Plumber has always been one hell of a sports fan, happily trading his overalls for a pair of basketball shorts any day. There's also a whole slew of familiar faces here to enjoy the good Christian fun of Mario sports, proving two things about Mario's identity. He's an athletic dude, and he has a pretty decent circle of friends. The next two categories kinda go hand in hand, at least with regards to what they contribute to the greater Mario identity. Puzzle games, like Dr. Mario, and edu games, like Mario is Missing, offer up a new, more cerebral form of gameplay for only the truly enlightened Nintendo fans. Obviously, you'll be getting different levels of complexity between the two, puzzlers focusing on really teasing and titillating the mind, whereas Mario Teaches Typing is like your cool homeroom teacher's attempt at putting the fun in fundamental learning. Both categories are pretty limited in scope and, in the case of edu games, pretty short-lived, but they still have a place in this list. They prove that even a Mario game has the potential to be cerebral, albeit for babies. With those two out of the way, we reach our last two major categories, the racing and party games. In a similar way to how the puzzle games were mostly comprised of Dr. Mario games, racing is dominated purely by the Mario Kart series, and party is entirely Mario Party games. Both have their own unique pulls, but more often than not, these are the fun party games you or your friends would pull out at big group gatherings. They're multiplayer, competitive, and most importantly, they're fun. Just like with the sports games, they further prove that Mario is a jovial fellow with plenty of friends, and there is a certain athletic nature to the games that they play. What these two categories do offer to the greater Mario identity is pretty straightforward, and kind of a given at this point. Still, it needs to be stated one way or another. Mario games are meant to be fun. Obviously, you should be enjoying yourself, whether you're playing Super Mario 3D World, Paper Mario, or even Mario Golf. But the kart racers and party games really emphasize fun in how they've been constructed and how they're meant to be played. If you're not enjoying yourself when you pick up the controller, then you're doing something wrong. A key part of Mario's identity is the proclivity towards fun, which earns it a spot on our identity board. We've nearly completed our Super Mario journey, but there's a bit of cleanup to do before we hang up our hats. First, we have to discuss the miscellaneous games, who all have unique genres that don't mesh well with the others. A lot of these games are pretty forgettable too. Take for instance, Mario vs. Donkey Kong. It's a very puzzle-light platformer that is more a spiritual successor to Donkey Kong than anything in the mainline Super Mario Bros. Series. Oh, and there's also 6 sequel games, just in case you were wondering. Miscellaneous games are certainly strange and have earned the right to be glossed over. Next up is spin-offs, which are precisely what they sound like. Whenever a Mario character got too big for their britches, they were offered up their own game. A lot of these spin-offs were also pretty good in their own right. I'm looking at you, Luigi's Mansion. But despite their quality, they don't really contribute much to Mario's identity. They are their own, isolated games about their own special characters. We pay them our respects, but keep moving on. Finally, we reach the definitive Mario category, the one all of us have eagerly been waiting for. These are the games where Mario just fucking shows up. That's it. That's all he really does in these ones. Most of these are fun little cameos from the Nintendo mascot, popping in to let everyone know that he is omnipresent and cannot be killed so easily. He's reffing matches in Punch-Out!, he's on sweaters in I Am a Teacher, Super Mario Sweater, he's going in for the finishing dunk in NBA Street v3. These aren't Mario games, they're hardly Nintendo games, but for the majority of these titles, you probably only know about them because Mario is in them. Mainline game or not, they provide us with the last piece of the Mario identity puzzle, the one that brings the entire thing together. Mario is an extremely marketable character. With that, our list of key traits is complete. If you were to pick up a brand new Mario game tomorrow, one that you had no knowledge of whatsoever, you could probably surmise a great deal about the game using the 9 traits I've listed here. That's not to say that Mario games have to follow this exact pattern and never stray from the path, because history has already shown us how weird Mario games tend to get. It's as if there's this weird internalized anxiety about the character not being enough, that there always has to be some strange new pull to keep players interested. I won't say whether or not that fear is founded, but I can absolutely say that the strange amongst the similar has kept pushing these games further and further into the future. There have been about 155 Mario games made since 1981, at a pace of approximately 3.9 games per year. For the sake of comparison, there have been about 82 Sonic games since 1991, at a rate of 2.8 games a year. For all my love of the Sonic series, even I know it's had its ups and downs in the past, but Mario doesn't really let failure stop him. Even if the entire world comes crumbling down around us, Mario is always gonna find some way to backwards long jump into the public eye once again. Sure, no matter how weird or different the games get, there will always be a distinct Mario identity at their very core. But the reason I can be so certain that he's going to persevere is the marketability. Even if it isn't your favorite game, or it isn't a classic 2D platformer, you'll know it's a Mario game if it sticks to these core tenets. Oh, and also if it has Mario written on the cover.
Do the Mario! Swing your arms from side to side. Come on, it's time to go. Do the Mario. Take one step, and then again. Let's do the Mario all together now.